Thank you. In March 2012, Brian Stevenson stepped onto the TED stage in Long Beach, California. His talk lasted 18 minutes. He offered no slides, no visuals, no props. He shared only 3 stories. The first was about his grandmother. The second was about Rosa Parks. And the third was about a janitor that he met in the courtroom. Now, at the end of those 18 minutes, he received the longest standing ovation in TED history. And within 24 hours, the audience came together to contribute over $1 million into his nonprofit. Now, for the math brain people amongst us, that averages at over $55,000 per minute that he spoke for. Not a bad return on investment, I'm sure you would agree. But here's what we can take from this story. That you cannot reach people's minds until you reach their hearts. And this is the first of 4 seeds that I want to share with you on how we can ignite the spark and unleash extraordinary career stories within the organizations and teams that we lead. Bad communication can kill productivity and cost us financially. Good communication can elevate our productivity and contribute to greater shareholder returns. When Warren Buffett was asked, what is the greatest business skill that you would suggest we work on? He said, communication. In fact, in one interview, he pointed to the wall in his office. And he said, if you look at that wall, there is only one certificate I have up there. And it is from a $100 public speaking course that I took at the Dale Carnegie Institute. So how do we communicate better within the organizations and teams we lead? Here are 3 suggestions for you. The first is to story tell. Get into the habit of telling better stories, just like Brian Stevenson did in those 18 minutes. And it is something that the chief engineer of Lockheed leveraged so well in 1943. When faced with the mission to put together America's first military jet fighter. It was a mission that had a critical timeline, a mission that was of the utmost importance. Yet Johnson had an idea. He recruited the firm's brightest engineers and mechanics. He gave them total design freedom. No idea too wild, no idea too crazy. And then he walled them off from the rest of Lockheed's bureaucracy. 143 days later, just 7 days ahead of schedule, Johnson and his team delivers to the Pentagon the country's first military jet fighter. Now, this wasn't the vision. This was one of the many goals that they had accomplished en route to a far bolder vision, that of saving the future of humanity. The sort of story that could unite everyone within that team. And imagine what could be possible when everyone from the most junior to the most senior shows up, demonstrating leadership qualities. And we have that opportunity to practice storytelling. Think about going to a networking event. I guarantee that one of the first questions you will get asked is, what do you do? What do you do? And I learned how to answer this question when I was speaking at Microsoft in the US. I met this older guy, and I said to him the same question, what do you do? And here is what he said to me. He said, Simon, I have been saving the world from boredom since before you were born. Now, what was going through my head? I was curious. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know how he did what he did. And that's the power of story. It gets people engaged. It gets people interested and curious. The second is whatever your message is, keep it simple, clear, and focused. We can swamp out our message with too many words, too many detail. But yet very often, less is more. Ernest Hemingway, one of the famed writers, was once challenged to write a story in 6 words. Just imagine having to write a story in 6 words that could move an audience emotionally. So he went away for a couple of weeks. He thought, what would I put down that would move an audience emotionally in just 6 words? So his friends brought together an audience. They pulled up a table at the front. Hemingway sat down and he read out his 6 words to the audience. They were: for sale, baby shoes, never worn. And the audience was moved in just 6 words. The third component of good communication is awareness. We all receive information differently. Some of us are visual thinkers. Some of us are detail-oriented. Some of us prefer big picture, small picture. But until we are aware of how people within our teams receive information, we don't know how to package and deliver it. Especially in a world that is distracted and is bombarded by so much information. It's also about thinking about different mediums. One of the things that I like doing is when I connect with people on platforms like LinkedIn, I love sending a voice note. Because for me, it does 2 things. One, if I want to get somebody's attention, if we want to get our employees' attention, voice notes are great. If you send an email or a text message, you might get a notification at the top and say, I'll come back to that later. If you get a voice note, you're curious. You want to click that play button and hear what is in that message. Secondly, there is energy that comes from your voice. If you send an email, if you send a text message, sometimes people have to make up what the emotion is. Where is that message coming from? But with voice, you can feel the visceralness of someone's energy. You can feel their mood, their emotional well-being in that moment. The second C is coaching. In 2008, at the height of the financial crisis, Google birthed Project Oxygen with the mission, the fundamental mission, to build better bosses. One of the main reasons they took this project on, which was a huge undertaking, was the fact that the department that had the biggest problem with management was the company's engineers. Now, when you're Google, your engineers are a vitally important part of your business, and it's a department you don't want to upset. As the Senior Vice President of People Operations at Google, Laszlo Bock, explained, engineers generally think managers are at best a necessary evil, but mainly they get in the way. They screw things up. And so he and his People Innovation Lab team sought to data mine performance appraisals, employee surveys, and nominations for top manager awards in order to understand the differential between highly rated and lowly rated managers. The statisticians poured over 10,000 observations across 100 variables before coding 400 pages of data and rolling the observations out to the rest of the company. What they discovered was that there were consistently 8 factors ranked by order of importance that contributed to better bosses. Down at number 8 was the fact that they had key technical skills that allowed them to help their team. Up at number 1, however, was the fact that they were great coaches. What they learned from this is that just because you are a great developer, you are a great engineer, you are a great researcher, does not automatically make you a great leader. So what they did was two things. First, they changed their employee surveys. Instead of focusing on the outcomes that the managers accomplished, the employee surveys now focused on things such as the time they spent coaching their team, whether they had a clear vision that could be articulated to the team. Notice that first C there, communication, and so on. The second was they designed their coaching programs to be exclusively focused on developing their leaders into great coaches. And within this construct, they were tapping into something that we are aware about, but maybe we don't appreciate, which is the hero guide concept. When we build businesses, we want businesses to be the guide to unleashing the hero potential in our customers. When we are in positions of leadership, however, those customers are our employees. We in positions of leadership are the guides to unleashing the hero potential within our employee workforce. The third C is capacity. The capacity of your workplace. You can give your teams the best tips, the best strategies and hacks, but they will not apply themselves or follow through on what you suggest unless they have the capacity to do so. And capacity can be split into 4 dimensions: physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy, and spiritual energy. Let's start briefly on physical energy. Ashley Bernardi, CEO of Nardi Media Relations firm, took her business from 6 figures to 7 figures in the span of 2 years. Those 2 years being during the COVID pandemic. And the catalyst for her transformation, not just for herself, but for her business, started in 2016. In 2016, she faced a health crisis. She suffered from a debilitating form of Lyme disease and postpartum depression following the birth of her 3rd child. It was a wake-up call for her. And it meant that she began to prioritize her physical well-being. In the process, she became a more compassionate and kind leader. She started to prioritize her sleep. She even took naps throughout the day. She leveraged technology. She hopped onto the internet. She went onto sites like Coursera and Udemy to learn all about well-being. The importance of leaders being energizers for their company. What she understood is that the relational energy those in positions of leadership have a larger than average impact on their employee workforce. You know this. When employees come in and the leader has not had a particularly good night, we can feel it. When they've had a great weekend, you can feel it. Energy is a language that has no words, yet you and I feel what it is trying to tell us. So capacity, first one, physical energy. Second is mental energy. Our ability to focus and also cultivate a resilient mindset to adapt to whatever the world throws our way. I read a couple of years ago in a newspaper called The Guardian, a fascinating study that shared that the average attention span for a human was 8 seconds. That is, it took them 8 seconds to try and do a task before they were distracted. If you look slightly lower in the footnotes, it said that the average attention span for a goldfish was 9 seconds. So we've got to this point where attention spans have become shorter and shorter and shorter. And so in today's world, the ability to focus on what matters most, it's such a powerful differentiator. In fact, at the Museum of Modern Art, Marina Abramović, the performance artist, did something that showed how important it is to live in the present. Because so many in society live this tragic experience of living as if they're never going to die and then dying having never really lived. In this exhibition, she sat. Opposite her was an empty chair, and she invited audience members to take a seat in silent conversation. You could sit there from as little as a few seconds to a few hours. It was a private, yet very public affair. One girl stood up, she came away, and she said to the reporter, "That was a very quick 40 minutes. The reporter said to her, "You were there for 90. An older man stepped up, went away from the room, leaned his head on the wall, and fell into tears. When asked, "Why did you do an exhibition like this, Marina?" she said, "I wanted to remind people of the importance of living in the now, in the present, not in the past, which we can't control, not in the future, which, yes, we can plan for, but we don't have 100% control over, but in the absolute now. To focus on what we can control, not what we can't. When we do the latter, we become paralyzed by overthinking, but when we do the former, we are energized and empowered to take action." The second part of mental energy is resilience. It's the mindset piece of the puzzle. Understanding that there is no one reality, we only live in customized realities, living in the feeling of our thinking moment to moment to moment. When we appreciate that, we understand how our thoughts are like colors on a palette. We're holding that paintbrush, and at any moment we can choose a different color to paint our canvas with. The third is emotional energy. Emotional energy is simply how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to others, and how we respond to things out of our control, such as the COVID pandemic, the financial crisis, and so on. Life is not what happens to you, it's how you choose to respond to it. And one of the most powerful concepts that we can access that allows us to respond better is the idea of gratitude. This is a powerful exercise that allows us to elevate our energy and mood in an instant. 3 steps, very simple. 1, think of somebody that you can be grateful for. The first person that comes into your mind. 2nd is to write down why. Why did you choose that person? Whether it is a partner, a colleague, a boss, a friend. The 3rd step is to pick up the phone, call that person, and tell them exactly what you wrote. Now, if you're not comfortable doing that final step, at the minimum, you want to leave a voice note. Remember what I said earlier? With voice carries energy. With voice, people feel that gratitude. The final dimension is spiritual energy. There is a saying that goes, the longest journey we make as humans are the inches from our heads to our hearts. And that is because few of us have clarity on what purpose means for us. But when we can communicate that to our team, when we can make it clear, when we can bring out the purpose within our organization, imagine those that we lead doing more than the basic of their job description. It's a powerful scenario to imagine. The final C, so the first C was communication, the second C was coaching, the third C was capacity, the final C is creativity. Creativity is essential to thrive and adapt in a changing world. When Massimo Bottura, 3-star Michelin chef, was driving to his restaurant, Osteria Francescana in Medina, Italy one morning, he heard on the radio the song "Walk on the Wild Side" by Lou Reed. As he was bopping to the music, it gave him an idea. He went into the kitchen of his restaurant, pushed open the doors, and he said to his team, "I want you to design a plate of food inspired by Lou Reed's song Walk on the Wild Side. Now, after they got over their initial shock of thinking, what the hell has this guy been on? They then started to get to work. Some designed plates of food based on the era of Lou Reed's song. Some designed plates of food based on the tune of the song, the lyrics of the song. Now, what we can take from this moment is Massimo Bottura was rewarding novelty over predictability. Novelty over predictability, and that is the birthplace of creativity. And in order to ignite the creativity within our teams and organizations, we need to have diverse inputs. Now, when I talk about diverse inputs, it's not just the people we spend time with. It's also what we're reading, what we're watching, what we're listening to. All of these things have a powerful impact on our creativity. After all, our environment is the invisible force that shapes our thinking, what we see as possible, and how we see ourselves. Steve Jobs, when he came up with the magnetic cord for the MacBook, it wasn't entirely his idea. On a trip to Japan, he noticed that appliance companies had a magnetic cord in their products, and he wondered, why did these appliances have a magnetic cord? One of the responses he got was, if a child was to slip over one of those cords, the wire would come out, but the appliance would stay still. And Steve said, that's amazing, I'm going to bring that into the next MacBook. And when he did, the magazines and the media hailed him as a genius, an innovator. And yet the idea was inspired from a very different industry. Here's the thing. If you're only looking at your competitors, you can only be as good as your competitors. And that automatically sets a limit to your creativity. But when you look beyond your competitors, into different fields, industries, and thinking, that is how you can begin to ignite your creativity. When I launched my book earlier this year, for example, I didn't want people to just go to a bookshop and to take the book out and pay for it. I wanted to immerse people in an experience. One of my friends that I spent time with was a bartender at the world's best bar in London's Connaught Hotel. After speaking to him, we came up with an idea of designing a cocktail after my book. So when people went to the hotel, they could order the Energize cocktail and it would be served on a copy of my book. Later in the summer, I had a contact in the Web3 community, and we put together one of the world's first book launches in the metaverse. People joining with their Oculus headsets. Again, the birthplace of this creativity was not me alone. It was having diverse input into my thinking. So the message I want to leave you with today is this. We can accomplish extraordinary things only if we have the energy to do so. Only when we have in place leaders who are great communicators and coaches, who can develop the capacity of their teams and who can ignite the creativity of their organization. I believe that our value is determined by how much more we have given to the world than we have taken from it. And to do that, we need a team that believes in our vision, a team that is equipped to make great things happen, for we never get to the top alone. I am Simon Alexander Ong. Thank you so much for listening. I will be over at the Right Selection stand if you would like to grab a copy of my book.